address this weak ass internet shit one time, and I'm gonna get back to giving my love to my fans.
Y'all see Harry Styles? Did you see that this morning?
Toxic masculinity is real.
It still is, it's hard to hear that we're out here feeling really alone.
There's no lack of manly men. There's a whole diversity of men. You could be whatever the fuck you want.
If you haven't seen the backlash that Harry Styles received for wearing a dress, this isn't even the first time he's done something like this.
Over the past year and a half, I've been doing some healing and self-reflective work. And through this work, I've had the revelation that I identify as non-binary.
Gender is best defined as a construct or an identity.
The original Word of God never once mentioned anything about homosexuality.
I don't know why everyone has to conform to your idea of masculinity, you dumb fucking weirdo.
Sadly, this feeling of being unprotected isn't just a notion. It became a viral conversation in 2018 after a young black woman was attacked by a white man in a McDonald's in Florida.
Men do live shorter lives, and that's because of a repression of emotions.
It started when I was in a club. A boy touched me. I said no. He kept touching me. It got to the point he got violent. It gets to the point that the only reason why a man decided to stop touching me in the bookstore I talked about earlier is because he realized my husband was not too far away. He said, "Sorry, bro." Never said sorry to me.
Whoa, hold on.
A large majority of native tribes had either these three genders, male, female, two spirits, while some tribes had up to 5.
To me, I see this and I'm like, what a fucking G. Like he don't give a fuck, right?
Wait, is that really what you think, or is that what you're saying? Like,
I swear to God,
when you see Harry Styles wearing a dress, like your immediate thought is, wow, this guy's a real gangster.
Yep. Because I'm all about challenging social norms.
So I don't know why Candace Owens decided to go on a giant tangent along with her really awesome friend Ben Shapiro and Donald Trump's son.
I can explore anything. It's just like, it's really inspiring.
Your DNA is going to be the same from when you're born and until you die.
I think it's egregious. I think that biology is biology. It's amazing to me.
You don't tell this little faggot ass nothing.
Even if a person is trans, you should have the decency and the respect to call them by their preferred pronoun. I don't play that game.
I know that I will never be a biological cisgender female, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm still a woman. You know what I'm saying?
What drove me to make this video was the fact that so many people are still ignorant about this topic, about these multiple topics. And so many people think that a lot of these things are new ideas, that they just came out of nowhere because it's 2021, when we forget that these things have been going on pretty much since the dawn of time, some of these things, especially as it relates to gender. Of course, you know, I'm black, and I have a black family, I have black friends. And when it comes up to these conversations, when we have these conversations, so much ignorance and lack of education and lack of knowledge on these subjects is ingrained into these conversations that it makes you want to run out of the room, go in a corner and cry, because it's so disgusting that people don't want to open their minds or maybe open their phone or laptop and do a quick little Google search about where these things come from and what was the origin of some of these things. We forget that sex and gender are two completely different things. We forget that men set up systems that block non-binary people and women from succeeding and getting to where they want to be because of what the very essence of toxic masculinity is and has become. We forget how we have forgotten how far women have come in society and how far we still have to go. We can't sit on the sidelines, just like with anything else. Just like with anything else. When I talk about white privilege, I talk about using that to help other people of color and using what you have to help push the movements forward. So we, people who are not women, have to help push the movement forward as they are struggling to push it forward. Let's break it down. Gender roles. A gender role, also known as a sex role, is a social rule encompassing a range of behaviors and attitudes that are generally considered acceptable, appropriate, or desirable for a person based on that person's biological or perceived sex. Here's another one for you. The World Health Organization Regional Office for Europe describes sex as characteristics that are biologically defined, whereas gender is based on socially constructed features. They recognize that there are variations in how people experience gender based upon self-perception and expression and how they behave. As people go along and continue to keep doing the research on the things that I just defined, you'll find out, for instance, let's talk about transgender people right now, because some of these people out here are freaking ignorant when it comes to this topic, and people who are non-binary. Let's talk about both of them. It is legitimately ingrained in their mind. I use this analogy all the time. It's like putting a diamond inside of a ball of dirt. It's still a diamond no matter what, just because it's covered in dirt. You know there's a diamond there. This is the issue though. We create these ideas that these things are so brand new when it's scientific law that people who are transgender or non-binary are 100% completely valid because of the way their brain works. You may externally see a woman, but I guarantee you, if their gender expression is that of a man, it's not because they just want to be a man. It's literally because they have the brain of a man, because the male and female brain as it relates to sex work differently. And the same thing with people who are non-binary. 100% completely valid because it's scientific law, and this is the way these things work. We forget that thousands of years ago, this was happening, but for some reason, which is one of the largest flaws, in my opinion, in human history, when these spiritual passages and books came along. Let's look at the Bible, for instance, and I talked about this before. People who practice Christianity, there's 3.9 billion Bibles sold worldwide. 2.4 billion people estimated to practice this faith. You do know that the Bible that you can go to your local Barnes & Noble and get is not the same Bible that was written originally. You do realize that there's 400 years in one page turned from the Old Testament to the New Testament. You do realize that some of the, and I practice Christianity as well, but you do realize, we have to realize that even some of the miracles Jesus performed were not even originally written down. You do realize they didn't have the technology back then to just copy and paste what someone wrote into another book and keep doing the same thing until they had thousands of copies. You do realize they had to handwrite those things, right? You do realize that the word homosexuality was never actually originally mentioned in the Bible, and that the Bible has been rewritten, altered, and changed. Do your research of what happened between 1943 and 1952. Do your research on what happened when they began translating the Bible, how they didn't have the right resources and tools available. If we come together and learn these things, then we can question a lot in the Bible. Because who was writing in those books? A human. And what do humans want most? Power. So many of these ideologies that we hold within ourselves, no matter what belief system, is based off of that belief system alone. What we have to learn to do is recognize how long people have been fighting for the right to simply live. Here is something fun for you, since we're going to try and completely rewire the brains and the mind that people are thinking. And here's something. For generations, makeup has been seen as a girls-only enterprise, and we forget that it wasn't always that way. For millennia, stretching from 4000 before Christ existed through the 18th century, men traditionally used makeup in a myriad of ways. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that makeup was relegated to one end of the gender spectrum And that's just one example. You see what I'm saying? These things, oh my God, people are so stupid. If people just did their research, they could not refute the evidence. They couldn't refute the evidence that clearly shows how us as human beings want power and want to rewrite the narrative, which is why we started rewriting and revising all of these spiritual books, all of these spiritual passages. However, what we've done is we formed this idea that a man is this one thing and a woman is this one thing, forgetting, as I stated earlier, that male and female are just simply genitals. That's simply what it is in the chromosomes in your body, point blank, period. Gender is so much more. The debate a few years ago and still going on now, it was a huge thing a few years ago, I remember this, where so many people were talking about there are so many genders, there are so many genders. People were saying, no, there are only 2 genders, 2. What they didn't recognize is that they were talking about sex, not gender. Our language, I mean, that's why our language is so flawed and insane and difficult to learn. We have for so long been comfortable with living within the confines of what our world gives us without ever questioning it, without ever taking a moment to say, something about this does not seem right. Ever since my very birth, I have been questioning so many things in this world because it's flawed and because humans exist and because we want to be understood, we want to rewrite a narrative, and we want to be in control. And so what do? Do you recognize how many people, how many human beings, whether that be male, female, or non-binary, or any other part of the gender spectrum, you recognize how many people did not fall into the stereotypical ideals of what it means to be their classified sex? Recognize how many people ended their lives? Do you recognize how many people cut off their families? How many people are now homeless? Do you also recognize how happy some people are? How free they are now? How excited? How loved they are? How beautiful they are? We sit here and we can't grasp the simple, speaking of they, we sit here and we can't grasp the simple idea of they. Do you recognize how synonymous they has been with a lot of things? I recognize that a lot of conservative people especially say, why do we say they? We don't use the word they. They went to the store. They went to the amusement park. They went to go put gas in their car. Because of these biblical passages and these spiritual words that were put down on a page that aren't even accurate to some extent right now in human history, we rip apart the beauty people have within. If you would do your research, you would find out this. Although non-binary is often regarded as a new idea, the identifier has been around for as long as civilization has. In fact, non-binary gender has been recorded as far back as 400 BC to 200 AD. Along with that comes the idea of two-spirited, which defines someone as who has both the masculine, quote-unquote, and the feminine souls, spirits, traits, which stretches all the way back to the indigenous peoples. Why are we... There are so many examples out there that stretch out to so many different cultures, heritages, communities, etc. Traditions that show you that there's more than just male and female. There's so much that we as human beings have yet to uncover. We sit here and we ponder to ourselves, and we're thinking, people like Ben Shapiro, we're just making up these terms now. We're not making up random words. These are the things that are used to classify and show who people know they are. So why are we destroying people's very existence because we don't understand it? A lot of minority communities have to come together to recognize that these things have been around since the very beginning of time. From the way people raise their children to sex education, these things need to change, have to change for the very benefit of people's mental health and emotional support. I heard that purposely using the wrong pronouns for someone is an act of violence against them. And when I first heard it, I said, violence? What? No one's physically attacking anyone. And then I did my research on the word violence, simply used to harm, used with malintent. And when they said the statement again, they said, it's used as an act of psychological violence against them. And I said, yes, it is. Yes, it is. To maliciously call someone by their wrong pronouns because you didn't do your research is a comment on your ignorance, not their existence. This is a short little story. I was watching The Breakfast Club the other morning, as I love to do. I really enjoyed them. They had a segment though. They were talking about who gets served first, the man or the children at dinner. And I immediately thought, so we're immediately diving into heteronormality, which is simply the idea that everyone is basically straight until proven otherwise. And so, sitting there, I'm thinking, of course, there are all these people around the table who only have that heterosexual experience. And I'm thinking, well, what about everyone else? What about everybody else? What about the people that there's not a man at the table. There's not children. Or maybe there's a non-binary individual at the table with their children and a wife in the kitchen. Or maybe there's a male in the kitchen and a non-binary individual at the table and no children. There are so many different traditions and households. We can't have these universals. And yes, you can say, well, the majority of people, well, if that were true, then the Breakfast Club would not be talking about black issues, would they? Because the majority of the people in this country are not black. So when it comes to a lot of these things, I want to shake it up. Because like I was talking about, we have to change the way we raise our children in our household. Why, when it comes to a gender reveal party, it shouldn't be called a gender reveal party? Because that child hasn't had the opportunity to find out who they are yet. It could be called a sex reveal party. It could be called a sex reveal party. But why is it pink and blue? Why is pink feminine and blue is masculine? Why do we give girls dolls and boys transformers? Why do we put pants on boys and skirts on girls? There are a lot of parents now who are deciding that for the benefit of their child, they will raise them with no label attached and allow their child as they grow up to create their own assertion on who they are. Because we think kids are stupid, but kids are so smart. It's every little thing that we do in this society as it pertains to sex that leads to the discrimination of people who are simply being, I want these people to get this through their thick skulls, right? Who are simply being who they were born to be. Do you not understand that? You were born to be who you are. Now, do not sit here and tell me that you were born racist, that you were born homophobic or xenophobic or misogynistic. You were taught those things. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between what's put into your DNA and in your mind when you're born, how you're wired. We cannot afford to lose some of the most beautiful beings on planet Earth because you can't understand them. In some ancient communities, people who were seen as non-binary or two-spirited were seen as having gifts from the gods to be able to see things and experience things the others could not. So if your child or friend or parent or co-worker, acquaintance, or yourself is experiencing this, or anything else on the gender spectrum, remember, you are 1,000,000% beyond valid. And it's not your fault that we live in a society that has been conditioned to believe otherwise because of the lack of research they have done for themselves. It is not your fault that these spiritual passages have been mistranslated, altered, and changed for the benefit of protecting these mega churches. You were not wrong. You were not a fiend. You are beautiful. You know, it baffles my mind that people are so willing to wallow in their own sorrow and their own filth and ignorance. It's a disgrace, quite frankly. However, how are you going to know you're wallowing in filth when you make it look like a gold mine? Like I was saying earlier, everything from the way we raise our kids to sexual education to bathrooms, we've got to change these things. We really do. Because then you have to be willing to have the conversation of, are these bathrooms based off of sex? Are they based off of gender? And if you say gender, then every store better have just a long extension added onto it that has every single gender known to man. It's also just quite frankly disturbing that cisgendered men have created this narrative for so long that women are less than, or non-binary people are less than, or anyone else on the gender spectrum is less than. Because you're not. Because you're not. But men want power. And they've been told to be strong, to not cry, to pay the bills, to go out and work in the fields, to break themselves down to fit a narrative that our society gives them. And that narrative is toxic, which has created toxic masculinity. A study in the Journal of School of Psychology uses the following definition to explain toxic masculinity. The constellation of socially regressive masculine traits that serve to foster domination and the devaluation of women, homophobia, and wanton violence. Growing up, I saw toxic masculinity everywhere. Everywhere. The pushing and the forcing of someone whose sex is a male to play football or basketball, to go out in the field and work. The ignorant ideology to assume that you were one specific thing because you were born inside of one specific thing. And this is the issue. I see so... Why do alpha male videos exist? Why do we create this idea of what a man should be? We've forced it upon people, which goes back thousands of years as well. We forced upon people what a man should be. I talked about earlier where makeup came from, where wigs have come from. A lot of toxic masculinity comes out of a self-belief in self. Comes out of a covering, so to speak, a covering up of the true self. And in order to hide who the true self is, you put on a mask. People get tired of it. Do you recognize the mental war that people are going through right now because you as a human being have forced your friends or acquaintances or children or co-workers or yourself? You forced all of these ideals onto them. One of the biggest examples I can point out is the idea of manning up. What we don't recognize is the subconscious consequences that come along with that. If you were to tell a little child who hasn't even had the opportunity to really fully dive into their own gender expression to man up, and they say, what does that mean? It means get tough, be strong. You have just, we're talking about vaccines putting chips in your freaking arm and in your head. You have just planted a chip into their brain that's going to stick with them for the rest of their life. You just messed up. Because now they're going to equate manliness with strength. And, oh, if a man is strength, then what must a woman be? See what I'm saying? It is these subliminal and subconscious thoughts we plant into people's heads. And it comes with so many things. I guarantee you most of these so-called men who are practicing toxic masculinity have a degree in it and are walking around with it in their pocket all day long, 24/7, are hurting on the inside. One of the biggest things I heard an alpha male say one time is that you want to show no emotion. You want to keep people anticipating your every move. That's just a need to be wanted. A lot of black men in our community who are walking around in gangs, holding up guns, having their pants sagging down, getting locked up. I guarantee you, if they identify as this, they're just scared little boys, wanting to be held, wanting to be cared for, wanting to be loved. That's all they truly are. They're just scared little boys wanting to be held, wanting to be loved, wanting someone so badly to care about them, they do anything. And as soon as they get the love they've desired, my God. Another common example is saying, boys will be boys. This expression advocates for careless, aggressive, and or otherwise damaging behavior in young males, rather than teaching them about responsibility and growing up to their mistakes. What many people fail to realize is that these things we're talking about right now, right, have been talked about for so long. And I hate when comedians or entertainers will come together and make a statement like, the world has gone soft. No, the world hasn't gone soft. The world is just tired of your ignorance. The world has just created bigger and better means and modes to damage, destroy, and hurt people. The world has grown beyond your ignorant, childish, and ridiculous jokes. All these men, these so-called men who fall underneath these ideas, I guarantee you they have body image issues. They look at themselves in the mirror and they say, I don't match what that magazine says I should match, therefore I am not man enough. Or they have depression and they try and work themselves out of it. Men don't show emotion, men don't cry, men don't do these things. Because who said men don't do these things? Oh yeah, that's right, men. Who created the idea of these things? It wasn't no God, I can assure you that. It wasn't God. And it will continue to baffle me that people just accept these ignorant ideas and are open to just moving on. They're just okay with accepting the fact that God will never love me because I'm X, Y, and Z. God will never love me because I'm Y and Z. God will never love me because I'm Z. When we forget that these books may not even be accurate. What I implore everyone who is watching this to do is to just do your research and treat others with the dignity they deserve. And just because you may not understand doesn't mean their experience is invalid. On the basis of sex, gender, sexual orientation, toxic masculinity, femininity, what it means to live a life. I implore you to do what it takes to reach inside of the dark human beings we are and wring out every single piece of ignorance and false ideologies we have living up here. Because it is in the moments that you actually do your research that you find out how beautiful the world around us actually is. But if you don't take that first step, if you don't take that opportunity, you will be lost in the wilderness.